Assalamu alaikum and hi viewers, this is Sajjad Hussain and you are watching my YouTube channel. Welcome to today's video in which we are going to discuss a poem by Philip Larkin, and the name of the poem is Ambulances. Philip Larkin is an English poet of the movement. He is said to be a literary disciple, follower of Thomas Hardy, and there is a lot of pessimism and bleakness and monotony and nihilism in his poetry, and he is said to be a poet of death and disease. Now this poem Ambulances was written in 1961, and the poem conveys the theme of death as a stark reality, as a bitter reality of this life. Now let's start the poem. Closed like confessionals, they thread loud noons of cities, closed like confessionals. Now the speaker, the poet says that these ambulances are closed like confessionals. Confessionals are rooms that are airtight and that are completely closed from all sides, and these rooms are used by the priest in order to listen to the confessions of the sinners before their death. In Christianity, the belief is that a sinner must confess before he dies in order to avoid the torments of hell. So closed like confessionals, these ambulances have complete privacy, and these ambulances have complete secrecy, like the rooms in which the priest hear the confessions of the sinners. They thread loud noons of cities. They is for ambulances. Thread means move about. Loud noons of cities. There is a lot of rush and there is a lot of traffic and there is a lot of noise, giving back none of the glances they absorb. These ambulances move about in a great rush, in a huge traffic, and these ambulances do not respond to the glances of the people, those who look at them. Now this is how these ambulances, though these are non-living, have been given a human quality, and in literature it is called pathetic fallacy. So these ambulances do not respond to the glances that they absorb, looks that they absorb. Light glossy gray, look at this alliteration, glossy gray. Arms, this is their color, glossy is shining, gray. Arms on a plague, they come to rest at any curb. Curb is a fixed point where these ambulances take the patients and move to the hospitals for their treatment. All streets in time are visited. Now this is what suggests that these ambulances have a particular routine, these have a particular schedule, and it is followed completely. Then children in the second leg. Now let's come to the second stanza. Then children strewn on steps or road, or women coming from the shops, past smells of different dinners, see a wild white face. Once again, wild white alliteration that overtops red stretcher blankets momently as it is carried in and stowed. Now the patients, one of the patients is being taken in the ambulance, and there are children strewn, spread on, strewn means spread, scattered on steps or road, or women. Children are busy in their own enjoyments, in their own games, and women are returning from shopping, and these women pass smells of different dinners. they move by and they pass by different hotels and restaurants where different dishes are being cooked, and the fragrance and the smell and sweet odor attracts them, but at the same time they see a wild white face. This wild white face is the face of a sick man, is the face of the patient who is being carried on the red stretcher, and the face of this patient overtops can be seen from the blankets that are spread over him as it is carried in. And this patient, this man who is deathly pale in appearance and who is being carried on a stretcher, is taken in and placed in the ambulance and sense the solving emptiness. Now, who sense the solving emptiness? These women who are returning from shopping, they sense the solving emptiness. So this stanza runs into the next stanza. The second stanza moves into the next third stanza, and this in literature is a device that is called enjambment. So these women sense the solving emptiness that lies just under all we do. These women find out that this life is meaningless, this life is empty, it is purposeless, it is full of nothingness, and for a second get it whole. For a second, for a moment, this realization and this awareness is so overwhelming, is so complete, that they are completely under the influence of the impression of death and the impending death and the forthcoming death, so permanent and blank and true. So this idea of the death is permanent, and it seems to be true to these women. The fastened doors recede, the doors of the ambulance are closed. Poor soul, they whisper at their own distress. These women utter this word of sympathy, this phrase of sympathy. They call this patient a poor soul. In fact, these women identify themselves with this patient, and a realization comes to them that one day or the other they have to go the way of all flesh, they have to die, and they have to taste death. So immortality of death and eternity of death is the idea that haunts them. For borne away in deadened air may go the sudden shot of loss round something nearly at an end. And what coherd means what in a sequence in it across the years, the unique random is haphazard, blend is a mixture of families and fashions. So when the person dies, obviously he loses all the enjoyments and all the entertainment and all the recreation that he experiences in this life. Even when a person is a patient and he is not living a healthy life, at least he can experience himself the random blend of families, and he can entertain himself with fashions and different things that life offers to him. But when he dies, all these things are denied to him. There at last, once again, this stanza runs into this last stanza for the completion of meaning. There at last begin to loosen So all these things that are enjoyed by a person in his life vanish and disappear, and all those relations and all those links and all those connections loosen and weaken with the approach of death. Far from the exchange of love to lie, far from, once again alliteration, and when the person dies, he has to live at a place and he is buried in the grave that is far from the exchange of love. Love cannot be showered on that person there, and he has to lie there unreachable inside a room, and that room is a grave, and it is unreachable, it is inaccessible, nobody can reach it. The traffic parts to let go by. Now from these meditations and from these deep thoughts and from these speculations, the speaker returns to the scene of the ambulances once again. He tries to suggest that death is everlasting and death is bound to come and death is unavoidable, and after highlighting the reality of death, he once again returns to the ambulances and says the traffic parts to let go by brings closer what is left to come, and it is a norm and it is a practice in the civilized societies that an ambulance is always given the way, no matter how great the rush is, how great the traffic is. So this ambulance is also given the way, and it brings closer what is left to come, and what is left to come is that grave, that death is brought closer by this movement of the ambulance. The quicker this ambulance moves about, the closer that grave and death are brought, and dulls to distance all we are. Obviously we are all dull to the distance that exists between our life and death. Nobody knows how long a person has to enjoy his life, and nobody knows when this death is going to haunt him and when this death is going to visit him. As far as the theme in the poem is concerned, there is the theme of death, there is also the theme of fear, and this fear is shown by the women when they see that patient being taken in the ambulance towards the hospital. They also for the time being are quite impressed, and they realize that death is ultimate and death is bound to come, and this is something that is highly realistic. When a person comes to know about the death of a near one or a dear one, for the time being he is in a sad and dejected mood and in a gloomy mood. He tries to identify himself with that dead, and he believes that he has to go the way of all flesh sooner or later. But this realization is temporary and is short lived. The moment a person moves away from the funeral services or from the grave of that person who is to be buried, he once again is lost in the colors and charms and attraction and fascination of life, and life once again seems to be very appealing and charming to him. And one of the important ideas in Philip Larkin's poem is that from general things and from generalities, in fact from specialities or from specific things, Philip Larkin moves on to conclude something that is general. This is what he does by the end of the poem. Mr. Bline, he is of the view that the way we live measures our life, and by the end of the poem 1914, he is of the view that never such innocence is going to be retrieved. By the end of the poem Church Going, he generalizes the idea that the churches will not lose their significance, and one way or the other they will retain their significance and importance. Likewise, in this poem, from different particular details, he draws a conclusion that is highly general, or he generalizes things, and he says that the distance between our life and death is unknown, and we are dull to that distance that exists between our life and death. Viewers, I hope you enjoyed this poem. The poem is in the form of iambic tetrameter, and the rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B, and okay, now for example, now let's come to this rhyme scheme. If road is A, shops is B, C is C, overtops is B, momently is also C, and stored is A. So this is the rhyme scheme: A, B, C, B, C, and A. So this is the rhyme scheme. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.